Hello, everyone. This is JT Keating, Vice President of Product Strategy here at Zimperium. We'd like to welcome you to another webinar here. We are going to have a little bit of fun over the next few weeks. And one of the main things that a lot of folks have asked us about is what are the actual the objectives? What are the hackers after when it comes to mobile? What are the main corporate assets and the like that get impacted? And so we decided that we would actually have a little bit of fun with it and talk about the 7 deadly sins of mobile security. This is the first of those, and this one is the deadly little sin of not protecting mobile devices and therefore allowing corporate email to fall into the wrong hands, either the data that's in the corporate email or using the corporate email for subsequent attacks. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. Standard perfunctory things. Of course, there's a Q&A capability on the as a part of the Zoom. Please throw any questions you've got on there, and I will address those at the tail end. We try to keep these to about 20, 25 minutes max so that you can enjoy the rest of your day and try and make sure that we're not just being superfluous in the middle of all this. Hopefully, I'll achieve that. We don't use the chat capability because we had some trouble with it. So even if you have technical difficulties, please just toss that into the Q&A section. And with that, well, and then by the way, standard again, we'll have a archive version of this up on the site within a day or two, and we can make slides available to those folks that are interested. So without further ado, let's actually talk about the deadly sin of not securing corporate email on mobile devices. Before we do, though, I think it's really important to kind of step in and level set, provide the infamous forest for the trees when it comes to this whole thing. Because a lot of people ask a very simple question, which is, well, are mobile devices really getting attacked? The answer is 100% unequivocally yes. 100% of our customers are detecting mobile threats constantly. And we literally have hundreds and hundreds of customers of all sizes and all geographies and all industries throughout the world. 100% of them have been detecting mobile threats. So the bad guys are very much going after these devices. And as a result of the fact that most people are reading a lot of their emails on there, obviously fits directly in with the deadly sin. It's important to note that an endpoint is an endpoint is an endpoint. Mobile is just the latest of these endpoints. If you consider, for instance, if you have patient data sitting on a laptop, it's no different than you have patient data sitting on a tablet. For today, if you've got email sitting on a tablet, it's the same as email sitting on a laptop, except for the fact that these devices are in fact different and they have different patterns of where they are and who can use them. For instance, the user is the admin in mobile. There is no central patch management system. The user decides what networks they're going to connect to. They decide what apps they're going to put on there. And oh, by the way, the device spends 80% of its time outside of the protected corporate network. So there are some things that are unique to it. By all estimations, right now, 60% of endpoints in the enterprise are mobile and growing, which means for a lot of companies, they don't have visibility to attacks or any kind of proactive protection, again, in this case, on the email, on well over, almost 2/3 of the devices that are accessing their network. So clearly that's a deadly sin to not secure 2/3 of your endpoints. But I mentioned that mobile is just another endpoint in terms of what we're doing and the capabilities and things on those lines, so it needs to be secured. But the attacks are in fact different for mobile. Some of the attacks on surface might seem to be similar, but they are very different. Because on mobile, all apps are in containers, traditional endpoints, malware was a major issue because a piece of malicious software could come in and it could go sideways through other applications. In mobile, because all apps are in containers, meaning their own little bucket, by themselves, malicious apps are nothing but untargeted fraud. Ad fraud, click fraud, that sort of stuff. They can deliver something to break out of their container, but by themselves, they're untargeted fraud. Same thing with phishing. It is untargeted. It is all about fraud, but again, can deliver exploits. We're going to show some examples of how that can occur here in a second. If somebody is going after XYZ company. Zimperium from the very beginning has always been built on protecting enterprises. There's been other solutions that have started in the consumer space. If you start in the consumer space, maybe malicious apps and phishing is all you need. We don't believe that, by the way. I'll tell you why. In order to actually remain persistent, bad guys always want to be persistent. If they've taken the time in order to take over any device, whatever that device may be, they want to be persistent and they want to be able to live past reboot and things on those lines. On mobile, where all apps are in containers, the only way to do that is to actually compromise the device. The device attacks, whether it's a root access, whether it's an elevated profile on iOS, something to break out and be above the containers and actually own that device is the only way to actually weaponize the device, and it's the only way to remain persistent. If I'm a bad guy, I'm not going to drop, and I'm going after XYZ company, I'm not going to drop an app in the App Store and pray somebody downloads it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a fake Wi-Fi network or do a man-in-the-middle attack directly across from the headquarters of XYZ company, and then deliver an exploit as soon as I find somebody from XYZ company. Very easy to do, highly efficient. Matter of fact, I'm going to show it to you here in a second. Our data has shown over the years now, 90% of the targeted attacks start with a network attack. That's going to be important when I start talking about how do we actually handle the solution to this whole thing. But it shows that things are a little bit different on the mobile side of the world. So we recently, we're here to talk about, the 7 deadly sins, specifically around email. We're going to run through some of the rest of them later, things like getting access to executives' contacts, turning on microphones and cameras, things on those lines. So we're going to talk about those subsequently. But today we're talking about the email side of things. We recently did a webinar, which is available on demand on our site if you'd like, of the top 5 reasons that hackers want your devices, right? And email is related to a lot of these. One is stealing credentials and passwords. Obviously, whether you actually might have those credentials and passwords directly in your email system is, one part. The other part is if they want to reset their password, if they control your email, then they can actually reset a password anytime they want to whatever they want, and they basically own all of your passwords. So obviously by stealing somebody's, having complete access and control to somebody's email system, they can actually steal credentials and passwords pretty easily. I mentioned this a minute ago. 90% of breaches start with a phishing attack, and this is from Verizon, but there's a whole bunch of different sources that have talked about this. By the way, we did a full webinar with GigaOM last week on the various different ways to solve phishing, not just mobile, but across the board, with their CTO, Simon, over there, former CISO of Bloomberg. And so again, if you're into phishing specifically, you can go check that webinar out. But 90% of the breaches that started with a phishing attack, well, 2/3 of emails are now being read on mobile. And so if I actually am able to compromise and take advantage of that fact, I can easily steal credentials, as I mentioned just a minute ago. What else are they after? Straight up data. I mean, obviously they're after data is a second thing that's in here. We actually had an interesting case in the Valley where we've got a lot of customers that are in the Valley. There's a bus that goes from San Francisco down to the Valley that has all the top tech companies folks on it. It's a free bus, free Wi-Fi, sometimes free coffee and donuts. Well, one of our guys kept getting a warning that the Wi-Fi on the bus was a fake Wi-Fi network from our technology. When we subsequently figured it out, what it was is there was a guy in a Prius that was behind the bus broadcasting his Wi-Fi at a higher power. And so everybody on the bus that didn't have our stuff was connecting to it. And so obviously all their emails and everything they were doing was being exposed. So credentials is one, data is another. And then there's actually using it to deliver something like WannaCry, right? So if I take over somebody's device and if I send an email as that person, or if I send a text as that person, but a lot of times email, I can actually send an email to somebody that's inside the corporate network. It's coming from me. It's got an attachment. It can deliver WannaCry. The guys behind WannaCry, the Lazarus group, are now almost exclusively focused on Android. Because they know that that is 60% of the endpoints and no protection. So it is a target-rich environment with, the single biggest security risk in any company has always been a carbon-based life form, aka a human being. Now those human beings are the admins, and they're the ones sitting outside these networks connecting anything they want, and they're the ones that then walk back in or send emails in. So makes for a very target-rich environment. So clearly getting access to email through the least protected endpoint today, which is mobile, is a target-rich environment. So what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd actually show you a little bit of a demo that we have here. And this particular demo uses a freely available exploit, uses a freely available, you can buy it almost anywhere, rogue access point, fake Wi-Fi network called the Pineapple. And there's different parts of this, and I'll even use this in some subsequent webinars because we go in, we show how you turn on a camera, for instance, and things like that. But what I wanted to do was just kind of give you a little bit of a visual for how this whole thing works. And so as smart as smartphones are, one of the things that's really dumb is unless you really change your settings, that the networks themselves, the phone will go to every single Wi-Fi it meets and say, hey, are you? And it starts running down through its existing list. As soon as it finds one where the network says, yes, I am, it connects. So in this case, the fake, Pineapple here was broadcasting and basically said, okay, I'm going to be Acme Network and I'm going to reply back. And that's what this guy was searching. So once they're connected now, the hacker can also take advantage of the fact that he knows the operating system and he can deliver an exploit. Like I said, this is just a demo, freely available exploit. What the person's doing right now is we've actually, for demonstration purposes, said, hey, why don't we actually show the person downloading something, right? Trick them into doing it, et cetera. Simple fact is, the bad guys don't have to do it. They already own the phone. They already own the connection. They can send the person any place they want, and they can deliver any exploit they want. Now, in this particular exploit that we're showing, just because it makes for a better demo, if you look in the upper right now, as soon as they actually launch this, you'll see that it's connected, and this is the exploit. And you can see now, as I pause it, we have root access on this iOS device. Simply by starting with a network attack, as I said, 90% of the attacks are network attacks, and then going from there to be able to actually deliver an exploit to compromise the device, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the ultimate objective. So as this thing starts going, what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm just going to go up to where we're now going to be dealing with the email side of things. So now if you look in the upper right here, we're talking about send mail now. Okay, so now we control, it's funny because when you have root access, sometimes we'd say we have as much control of the phone as the person does. It's not true. We have more control over the phone than the person does. So in this particular case, we're actually going to be sending an email. So this is a spear phishing example, and it could have been spear phishing to get documents like what he's doing here. It could also be spear phishing to be able to send WannaCry or some other kind of ransomware, right? So the point here is, by taking over the device, not only do we have all these other things we can do, we can actually send emails, which he just did, so we can spear phish. And then the other part is, all of the attachments of all your emails are in one folder on your device. So here he's just demonstrating that he sent it, including the typo, which shows that it's legit. I think it's kind of funny myself, right? So he says, oh, there we go. So the person can send him stuff and we can spear phish and get sensitive information, obviously a problem. But then the second part, as I mentioned, is all the attachments are in folders on your device. And the bad guy, since he has more control over your phone than you do, just literally just copies whatever he wants. He might just copy every attachment you've got, or in this particular case, for the demonstration, he said, let's just copy the merger information that we put together, right? So you can clearly see, by taking over this device, and you own the email. You own the sending of the email, and you own the receiving of the email. So it is a huge sin to let that device get into the hands. And by the way, as we move forward to what do we do to protect this, I think the other thing that goes with this is that if we own this device and if we own those emails and we're able to send, we're able to receive, and do all that sort of stuff, clearly there's ramifications across the board. And those ramifications apply to BYOD just as much as they apply to corporate phones. A lot of folks will say, well, we're doing BYOD, but all we're doing is giving access to email. Well, if you're giving access to email, you're opening a pretty wide door, okay? So now, how do we actually go about protecting this? And this session isn't intended to just be a total product pitch at all, but it's important to kind of go, okay, you just scared me. You just showed me how easy this is. You just showed me what a deadly sin it was. What do I do about it, right? So I mentioned this, and I'm bringing it back for a specific purpose. 9 out of 10 targeted attacks start with the bad guy controlling the network. And if the bad guy controls the network, and if your detection capability from a security solution is in the cloud, the first thing they do is completely cut off access to that cloud-based detection. So what it basically means is you have to do on-device detection. You have to be able to protect yourself on device, detect things on device, not rely on a cloud-based solution. And that is exactly what Zimperium has done from the very beginning. And the reason we've done it from the very beginning is because we've been protecting enterprises from the very beginning. So we said, in order to compromise this device, in order to own it, you need to compromise it, elevate privileges, root access, like I just got finished showing. The fastest, most efficient way, and even though they're bad guys, they're very good at what they do, is to set up a fake network and have your phone stupidly connect to it. That is the most efficient, easiest way of doing it. So we knew the bad guys were going to control the network, and we knew compromising the device was a key point. So we do zero-day detection using machine learning. The machine learning is trained up in the lab against billions of data points, tens of millions of devices we have around the world. Once we know with efficacy, how do we determine each one of these attacks, device, network, phishing, and malicious apps? We do our detection on device. We can roll our detection out in 2 different ways. One is a product called ZIPS, Z Intrusion Prevention System. If you're trying to protect the device 100% of the time, just like next generation endpoint protection for mobile, you use ZIPS. It runs 100% of the time, protects the data, protects the device, protects your email. If you have a mobile app, we can actually take the exact same engine and with an SDK, drop it directly into any mobile app. That's called ZApp for in-app protection. We have a bunch of customers. The one I think is very illustrative is a large bank, and they're using ZIPS to protect all their employees, and they're using ZApp to protect tens of millions of mobile banking users. So it's an example. Both of those come directly into our console. Because we're doing 100% of our detection on device, we don't have to lock our console into a cloud like cloud-based detection solutions do. So any cloud you want to be on, that's part of being enterprise ready, is we adjust to your solution, your environment, as opposed to the other way around. Behind the console is a capability called Z3A, which stands for Advanced App Analysis. There's malicious apps, which are detected by Z9. But then inside every environment, there also are a whole bunch of perfectly legitimate apps that are risky from a security and a privacy standpoint. Because when developers put mobile apps together, they're like Legos. They click a whole bunch of these guys together. I need a library for accessing a camera. I'll just go out on the internet, find one, and throw it in my app without realizing maybe it's sending traffic off unencrypted. Maybe it's sending traffic to a foreign country. Maybe it's connecting this to an ad network. So Z3A will actually tell you for all of your apps in very detailed fashion, here's the ingredients that are in there that have a privacy or security risk to your organization. And then behind the console, we integrate in with the largest set of EMMs. We're also the only ones that can handle multiple EMMs in the same console. As people are migrating from one to another or inheriting 2 different ones, we can address that without any problem. And then we have excellent forensics that gets dropped into a great set of SIEM solutions, whether it's McAfee EPO, who's a partner of ours, or the Splunk app, which we've got in their marketplace, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to pause and say, so basically, that whole chain that I showed you in that video, the minute that the network connected, it would have been stopped with Z9, with ZIPS. It would have been stopped right there. If for some weird reason they magically found a way of being able to go directly to delivering the exploit, maybe it was because somebody hit a phishing site and it came from the, from the website that the browser was processing, it would have been stopped right there as a device compromise. Had they tried to actually hit a phishing site or app, it would have been stopped there. You need to be able to have solutions to protect against all of these things. The email component is just one of the things that the guy does once he's on that device. But it also quite often is the objective, because it is one of the fastest ways of being able to bridge from this compromised device further into the network. Because as I mentioned, persistence is a main objective of the bad guys. Another time-tested axiom in security is and has always been land and expand. With 60% of these endpoints being mobile, having little or no protection on them, having the end user being the admin, spending time outside of my millions of dollars of corporate network security, it is the place to land. Then I want to expand. And email is a very simple, logical way to expand from that into the enterprise, into the protected network, and then to start to expand from there. So with that, I will wait and see if anybody has any questions. Again, you can toss it in the Q&A. If you don't, then that's perfectly okay. I never take it personally whatsoever, and I will give you some time back. So see if anybody has any questions on this. I do not see any. So with that, I would like to thank you again and remind you that this will be up on the archive here within a day or so. If you need slides or anything else. If you do have any questions subsequent to this, my email is jt.keating, Keating, @zimperium.com, and I'd be more than happy to field any questions you may have. Thank you all very much. Have yourself a fantastic day.